Wonderful.
Okay.
So we're going to start off with our round descriptions for WIDPSC. Basically, just because we have so many differentiations from what you're already doing in WSCC debates, we want to present you what exactly will happen in WIDPSC. So it's not only debating, we also have a reading round. The debates are different. We have an impromptu speaking round, and we have, wait, what's the fourth one?
Interpretive reading.
I think I mentioned it.
It's
The
fine. We'll
impromptu.
present all the categories. That's fine.
Jesus. Okay. So I think without further ado, we just move forward. So quickly, we have a little timeline for the selection process. So November 20th, which is today, we have the intro to Bitsbuzz and qualification task announcement. So as you've maybe gathered from the email, for gathering the pool, we are going to release a task to be done, which has to be submitted until 13, until the until 1 p.m. on December 6th. And then on December 9th, we announce the pool. Early January, we're going to have the selection live from the tw top 12 applicants, and we're going to pick who is actually going into the team and training for Malaysia exclusively.
Paulina, if you just could keep the slide on running for a short while.
Sure.
I thought it was monumental to call the qualification that's taking place in January LIDSPSC for a good reason, because every other country it seems on the planet Earth seems to call it seems to have some sort of an iteration of WITPSC in with I know an appendix with their countries or I don't know regions regions prefix. So I think it'll be monumental and interesting to call it the Lithuanian Individual Debating and Public Speaking Championships for the first time. Go ahead.
Exciting news. First time having this event. Okay. So the scoring will be divided equally between the four rounds. However, on the LIDPSC eve or day, we're not going to be debating. We're just going to be counting your LSDC score as your debating score. So you'll only be doing three categories, which first one is prepared speaking, which I actually forgot earlier, even though it's probably one of the main tasks of VITSPAS and what you would expect. And then you have impromptu speaking and interpretive reading, which we're going to get into. Anything to add?
I just wanted to say that people will be participating in the fourth category, just not on the day, unfortunately, but rather beforehand. So, late December, all of you will be expected to participate in the Lithuanian Schools Debating Championship, from which the preliminary round scores will be added as an aggregate score to your 25% markup of the entire scoring for the WIDPSC qualification.
So Christians will present first about the two categories, which is prepared speaking and Witzbus debating, and then I'll go over impromptu speaking and interpretive reading to clear everything up because there's a lot of rules, there's a lot of things that we believe need to be cleared up since Witzbus is not super prevalent in Lithuania, so not a lot of people know what we actually do and what skills are involved. So let's just get the show on the road.
Thank you very much, Paulina, for so nicely putting everything on the slide. So following on with the first event or first category that's absolutely crucial and perhaps the foremost category that we sometimes overlook is the prepared speaking, and which is divided into two categories, which is persuasive and after dinner. So I'd like to commence with the persuasive round, which is by far one of the most challenging rounds to speakers because not only do you have to present yourselves as very convincing, very eloquent, very structured and cohesive speakers, you also have to be cognizant of what's happening in the world, understanding everyone's feelings, their political situations. And therefore, when we talk about what essentially outlines a persuasive speech is a problem solution approach, right? Where you have to identify an actual problem that is important, not necessarily to the entire globe's population, but could be to a select group of people, but is important and is is perhaps very much prevalent to that group of people. And it does say that it doesn't need to be an earth-shattering problem because I think we have so many at the moment, and the numerous elections that we've been holding over the past, quarter of the year didn't really help on people's mood. So we don't need to necessarily invent a topic, but if we could offer a unique approach towards global warming, towards the minority rights, so on and so forth, that is already a good stance for you to sort of have as a get-go position for identifying a problem. Over the past years, I've heard multiple interesting takes on the big issues, but as well as sort of the people tackling less prevalent problems, such as I know the way we teach pupils literature in primary school. How do we see the industry of fortune tellers, and so on and so forth. So the what do they say? The world is your oyster, but rather you have a clean sheet, a blank canvas for which you need to just to show us that there is an actual problem and it's not, it's not a sort of a hypothetical problem, but it very much exists in the world and prove us that it's a problem. Because once you manage to do that, you can always then jump into examining whether at all there's a possibility to solve a problem or an issue of such scale or such specifics. And it might be so that your problem doesn't necessarily have a solution, and you'd have to offer that explanation to the judges, to the room, to everyone's who will be marking the very score of your speech. But from my own experience, speeches that were awareness based rather than offering solutions didn't really score on technical judges coming from Canada. You see, throughout today's session, we'll be showing and introducing different events in different categories, which all have specifics in style when it comes to each and individual participating countries. And that means that the persuasive round in Canada may be slightly different from the way the persuasive round is understood in South Africa, so on and so forth. So what do I mean by this? I mean that the rules are the same, they're absolutely identical, but the style and what is expected from it may differ a little. And that is the reason why later on we'll be announcing that we'll be having help from foreign judges, giving you out instructions on or and helping us moderate Q&A sessions in order for you to familiarize a little bit with the country-based specifics. And that is an important thing. Now, going to technicalities, the duration of your persuasive speech should be from 7 to 13 minutes. Sometimes they say 10 minutes with a 3-minute grace period on each end. But really, when it comes to the length of your speech, 6:45 and 13:15 should be the maximum thresholds that you shall not pass. Um, from my own experience, most speeches sort of um, either bottom down on 8 minutes, but most of them, if I had to sort of run a standard deviation of sorts, it'd be 11 minutes. The aggregate would be probably the average would be around 11 minutes. So I sort of recommend you to go in that sort of range of time. Um, you cannot use any kind of props, right? So this is not a drama or a drama category of sorts. You need to be convincing on your own with the stylistic devices that you got, from birth. So we cannot use plastic weapons or paper I don't know uh, colors. But I must say, and I must tell all of you guys that some sort of small note cards are accepted, but are frowned upon by judges. So you could technically have a note card, a flash card that would give you sort of some sort of a contextualization of where you are in your speech, but it's never a good idea to be very, how to say, evident about it, very explicit about using them. So I'd strongly recommend you not using it. The penultimate bullet point talks about competitors may not reuse speeches presented at inter-school competitions prior to January 1 or the competition year. So essentially, the way it works, and we'll tackle that once we announce the final pool with which we're going to pass on to the final qualification stage. The idea behind it is for you to have a unique speech that you haven't really done in the previous qualification year. So, for instance, imagine yourself participating in the qualification last year. You had a brilliant speech, but I know, lacked effort or lacked success in the impromptu round, and that sort of didn't give you an advantageous position to break through the threshold of entering and being as part of the team. So in that case, you'd be more of a you'd be expected not to use the same speech that you did last year in this year's competition. But we'll go into the specifics that apply for Lithuania for this year. But I think a good general rule of thumb would be no, not present a speech that you have presented publicly last year. Okay, we can move on to the after dinner. Now, after dinner is by far the most challenging prepared speaking event for the non-natives. Paulina perhaps could share her thoughts because she's done both. So, Paulina, would you mind telling us how did you feel in both shoes, and why did you perhaps choose to do a persuasive speech the second year, going the second time into the event?
Yeah, of course. I think choosing between the after dinner speech and a persuasive speech is very much a personal matter. Do you view yourself as more like a comedic person, or do you want to just talk about the issues that are most important to you? So I think the reason why I chose a different category for a second year is purely because I felt like I had something to address. But the after dinners are, I believe, one of the most fun things that you can do in WIDPSC. And of course, I'm definitely not forcing you to do an after dinner if you don't want to. But I had a speech titled "A Seven-Step Guide on How to Be a Baddie Just Like Me," and I performed the entire thing in this Valley girl accent that made people want to punch me in the face. The thing is that you can kind of go ham with it. You can be very creative with it. The thing is that you pick and choose according to your personality, what matters the most to you, and you can really develop yourself and the things that you care about just from your speech. I think that that would be all I could add.
I remember firstly reading your speech on the Simi Valley girl, whatever sort of approach towards how to live your life. And you see, that's one of the things where there's a very fine line on how palatable your humor or your approach is going to be to the national crowd, to the international crowd, and to a regional crowd. And the way it works is that sometimes the stuff that is extremely funny to us Lithuanians is going to absolutely flop in the international competition and vice versa. And I think us not necessarily having the ability to present ourselves in other international qualifications really circumvent the progress of delivering something that is going to be definitely accepted by everyone on the international stage. So use these guidance and advices as at your own discretion. So it's important that we do not discourage you from entering this category. Is that I think by far the most important thing is to know that this speech cannot be a stand-up speech where you throw one-liners and expect for the crowd to laugh. You still need to sort of operate within a domain of strict rules, which is addressing a specific audience, which is either at a formal dinner or a some sort of shared interest convention. And if I was to give an example of a real case or real life convention of sorts that would sort of mostly correlate with this category would be a correspondence dinner in the US, where the president, invites the president of the United States invites the journalist to sort of make a mockery of the president in a fine-tuned voice in a very demure fashion, right? I love this word that people use these days, right? So it's by far it's one of those things that sometimes even on the international stage, the judges get it, but the participants don't. And I think it's one of those things where it's extremely difficult to manage everyone's expectations, but do yourselves proud by making sure that it's not a very specific group of people that you're addressing that no one would really care about. Or even if it is, that everyone would be able to laugh at, that your joke is not offensive or that your category is not offensive, because I had those as well, where a guy gives a speech on janitors and then making a mockery of their poor lifestyle and low income, which was completely tasteless, and it's just bad taste to do something like that, let alone in an international competition. But things like that happen. Non-human audiences are acceptable. In fact, the winner of the category in Lithuania in 2010 was a guy from Cyprus who absolutely smashed the vampire voice and then sort of running the vampire convention, and that worked. If we move to a second slide of this category, I'd be addressing more details. So the duration of your speech is 6 minutes with the 1 minute on each end, or yet again, 4:45 or 7:15, the absolute non crossing thresholds that you should apply to. Uh, uh, you you have to use the same after dinner speech in all rounds. So for instance, even the in the Lithuanian nationals will probably have for some categories more than one attempt of you going at the category. So that means that you have to stick with one speech and not two. Um, Essentially, it's also important not to use your speech, whether it's persuasive or after dinner in an impromptu category or in a debate, as this is frowned upon for some reason. Back in my day, when I was participating, people allowed to use some sort of content from your speech in other categories. However, the general consensus for the previous years was that that is a no-go. So I would say let's follow the trend and not use any sort of material in other categories stemming from the prepared speaking from the prepared speaking category. So I think that would be it with prepared speaking. We can move on to individual debating. Now, individual debating is perhaps the most tricky part for us Lithuanians to fully engage ourselves with in a true sort of debating fashion, because we believe that a true debate is where we have to say a million words a second and sort of going around the style of WSDC, right? So this is a slightly different category because you don't necessarily have to win as a team, you have to win as an individual. So you'll have a format of two speakers per side where each and individual speaker is sort of uh, is fighting for themselves in the round. So even though technically you are part of a team, it may be so that if you don't get a nice partner paired up in the event, it'll be sort of you trying to get sympathy points from judges by delivering your own material. So this is a very fine line, and Grace Nolan from Canada will help us clear up some of the ambiguity in the room later on in December. So we just got the confirmations for the month of December, but from Sean McCabe, the judge of South Africa, Kirsten Price from Canada, and Gratha Dallin Nolan. So all of them will sort of help us really better understand of what happens, but in essence, understand the individual debating as an individual debate where you don't necessarily have to always agree with your buddy, but you need to sort of collaborate and work together in a fashion that would sort of give you more content points in an event. Just like WSDC, the category is adjudicated from the perspective of style, content, and strategy, whereas style in this particular event is by far more important than it is in WSDC. So it's important to bear in mind that if you want to score well in WIDPCSC debating, you absolutely have to care about the tone, the method, and the style approach towards your speech. So we'll go into specifics with Grasa as I think it would be extremely difficult to tell all the tiny details for you today, as some of it would be completely lost in the process, and I'd be not very genuine with you guys that that's going to have a long-standing effect. So I just leave it to here saying that it's completely different from WSDC, but for the convenience of running an Lithuanian schools debating competition, we thought it would be an easier way to incorporate that and not necessarily punish you for not doing this kind of debate beforehand. So we'll be assessing you guys in other categories. Thank you very much, Paulina. I pass on the word to you.
So just a little interception about the debating. So what it means to focus on style rather than strategy or analysis, of course, they're all very important. However, I think the best example I can give is when you're debating, let's say, gated communities. So in WIDPSC debating, you're going to have a little bit of easier motions. However, why that is done is for you to be able to speak like a public speaker, like a, let's say, I would say politician, but politicians are not known for their public speaking skills nowadays. The thing is, you have to make it inspiring. So let's say this year we were debating gated communities. So instead of talking about what a gated community is and giving points A, B, C, D, and then building the strongest foundation that I can, the way that I got more points is by comparing a community to an amoeba, and I did my entire intro for a minute, basically how we can compare an organism to a living community and what kind of functions it has. And basically, the more poetically you look at things, the better it is. Of course, not discounting from analysis. That's what debaters have to have incredible analysis too. However, the point being, you have to slow down, you have to learn how to control your voice, you have to make it persuasive. Because at the end of the day, it's what matters. It's applicable skills to real life, and something that we believe is incredibly useful for you as a person. And I think there's one more slide about speaker times. I don't know, Christiane, if you want to handle it.
Paulina, you can do it. It's just my eyes twitching right now, and I really need to use some tissue. Sorry.
Don't worry about it. Um, okay, so how this debate happens. So instead of three speakers, we only have two speakers in the team. And the first speaker goes as the first speaker and the third speaker, um, and the second in between, obviously. So both are speaking for 9 minutes. However, it goes like this. So the 6 minute speech by the first speaker, then a 9 minute speech by the second speaker, and then a 3 minute rebuttal, which is basically a summarization of reply speech as the second speech of the first speaker. So first speaker, second speaker, first speaker again. I hope that's clear enough. Okay, and now moving to impromptu. I think why I took to talk about this category is mainly because it was very difficult for me to figure out. So the first year I was there, it was probably one of my worst categories. Like I had pretty low scores, like something that did not match my expectations. And then throughout the next year of training, I got better at it. And then it's now one of the best things that one of my best categories. Basically, this is probably one of the most stressful rounds. You're given a piece of paper and there's a word on it, a little, let's say, phrase, and then there's a quote. So you flip the paper over, and now you have 2 minutes on the clock to pick one of those, either word, phrase, or quote, and make a speech that would be up to 5 minutes, I think, if the rules haven't changed. Sure, it is stressful. However, it is incredibly fun when you get to do it. So, what we like to do is we like to not only think about what philosophical idea we can bring on this topic, but we bring in examples that we like to talk about and we gain the idea from the example. So, let's say the first thing that I mention is a personal example, a personal anecdote. Then I bring in, let's say, a famous person. And maybe if I want to do like a third example, I could take like a country example on it. So there's a lot of things you can do. You can compare the short term and the long term, basically any contrasting view that could add to the betterment of your point. What did I not mention? Yeah. A fun thing about the notes, which actually seems incredibly stressful at first. However, it is kind of fun. So, as you take, as you make the notes during your 2 minutes, what we like to do is, as we're entering the stage, we crumple up our notes and we throw it in the bin, or we just visibly in front of the judges crumple up our notes. That shows the judges that we're not cheating. We're not going to look at our notes, and basically, we're going to speak at the top of our head. The judging criteria. So, agility of thought, substance and logical development, organizational ability, and then style. So, wit, humor, philosophy, and sentiment. Um, it's really great to know how to speak on the spot, even though you, let's say, know nothing about the topic. So last year I got the phrase hit the nail on the head. And what I did is gave these contrasting examples and then came up with some sentiment that could be valuable to others. The skill transposes literally everything, like your entire life, you're going to be using it, which is specifically why I love WIDPSC so much. So the speech guidelines. The speech is 3 to 5 minutes long. As Christiana said, with after dinner and persuasive, there are time penalties. Grace period is 15 seconds. And the speakers may argue in favor or against. They can talk about the topic, try to philosophize something, give a speech to like a greater audience. Imagine that you're like the president of the world, and bring something inspiring. Of course, there are a couple of limitations, so you cannot include other competitor speeches. You cannot include, as Christiana said, you cannot include your persuasive or after dinner speech. You may not bring your interpretive reading into it. And try not try, don't bring other people that are in the room in. Of course, props are not allowed. It is your voice and your charisma that people should be focusing on at the end of the day. And lastly, about the interpretive reading. This is one of the most fun things ever. What you do is you pick a text that you would like to present in front of an audience, and it has to be impactful. Like it can make people cry, laugh, you really think about something deeply and you present it in front of everyone. The fun thing is you can modulate your voice again. You show your ability to make people think about something. So it can be kind of anything, but you should pick something that's a bit more on the emotional side. Doesn't matter, funny, sad, should bring something up to the listener. So prose or poetry, we don't really go for poetry, but still can be fine. Um, yeah. Before the speaking itself, you have to do a little bit of an introduction to what you're going to be speaking about, which is probably the hardest part, I think, of this entire thing. Basically, tell the audience on why you connect with what you're speaking about, what you're reading, how it has contributed to you as a person, perhaps. Maybe it's meaningful in a personal way, and things like that. Introduce the author, the context. Should be pretty okay. Yeah, so we're not allowed to use published speeches. We're not allowed to use things from movies or shows. However, if the book adaptation is there and you're reading from a book, it can be awesome. So let's say in 2023, a guy won who was literally reading Harry Potter. Of all things, he was reading Harry Potter, and he did such a good impression of both Dumbledore and Hagrid. Like he modulated his voice in a very entertaining way, and he could lead the story forward with such grace that everybody was left speechless. Haha, speechless. Um, yeah, so there's a lot of ways that you can express your soul here too. So pieces have to be chosen before the tournament. Um, yeah, and you're judged upon your voice and your presentation, and not necessarily talent. So, though this is not a dramatic performance, you can still kind of go for it as you like. Um, how this is going to be applied in real life is that you're going to learn how to present your voice in the best way possible. So when you're in debates, sometimes it's like you're speaking so fast that it's hard to breathe. You're telling so many points and your voice gets so high pitched, and it's hard to contain yourself. What WIDPSC does is it forces you to slow down and to impact the speaker as much as you can. And I think that's absolutely wonderful. Um, what else can we have? Yeah, so we can use gestures and facial expressions, and you can either stand or sit. Um, Timing is 5 to 11 minutes. I think I remember Christiana is saying something about persuasive speeches and how they're usually like 11 minutes long, even though the average should be 8. So even though this is 5 to 11 minutes, it's usually 10 minutes long, just the aggregate. Yeah, same thing as with other rounds. We cannot use any information that we had beforehand, like that we have used in any other competitions. No props allowed, like always. And yeah, for personal examples, so the first year in South Africa, I used text from a South Korean author, talked about struggles with orphanages, a child being left alone, not being picked. And I did voice acting basically, where I was getting into the character of the child, of the father, of the mother, of the orphanage director, which was I got really high scores for. And for my second year, which is this year, I used the text from the South African author. Um, I forgot his name. Oh God. Wait. Basically, I used the South African text from a known comic, which was incredibly funny. The whole thing was about poop, a 5-year-old pooping himself, and had the audience laughing. I believe it was one of my best categories too. So again, a great chance to express yourself. Yeah. And